The moment my brother lifted his glass and delivered the punchline that would cleave our family dinner in two, I felt the room tilt. Laughter exploded like a firecracker, clinking against crystal wine glasses and bouncing off the pristine white walls. My parents joined in, their joy as exaggerated as the golden chandelier swaying slightly above us. I smiled, soft, calculated, a smile that masked the detonation I was about to drop. Because they didn't know. They didn't know that the background blur in their perfectly posed holiday photos, the quiet disappointment who never spoke too loud or laughed too freely, had been the one holding the foundation of this family together with trembling, invisible hands. 3 years. 36 payments. $288,000. And not a single thank you. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that they still believed I was the weak one. The one who had contributed nothing. Until tonight. Let me take you back. The Hollingsworth estate looked like a still from a high-budget magazine spread, white marble floors, chandeliers that hummed money, and candles that always smelled faintly of vanilla and ambition. My mother, Dana, curated that image like her life depended on it. And maybe in some ways it did. Every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner was a performance. Napkins folded into origami swans, wine selected like it was a religious experience, and her golden-haired golden child, my older brother, Caleb, always given the prime spotlight. He was the teacher, the achiever, the magnetic one who made my mother glow just by standing next to her. I was the footnote, the quiet girl with the finance job and the unremarkable life. My name's Emery, by the way, but in this house, I was more of a shadow than a daughter. You're just not expressive enough, Emery, Mom would murmur while adjusting Caleb's collar before photos. Dad would nod absently, glass of Merlot permanently attached to his hand, lost somewhere in his half-finished regrets. I learned early on how to fold myself into corners, to speak just softly enough not to be noticed, and just clearly enough not to be accused of sulking. That's what survival looked like in a family where the truth was as carefully dusted over as the antique vases in the hallway. But that night, the night, I wasn't folding. The table glittered with silverware we only used for show. Mom fussed over the arrangement of roasted duck, garlic potatoes, and wine like she was staging a Vogue photo shoot. Caleb's wife, Marla, tossed her hair and laughed too loudly at his jokes, and Dad pretended he wasn't halfway into his third glass. Everything was perfectly curated until Caleb raised his glass. He smiled, that effortless grin that always earned applause, and said to Emery, the only person in this family who manages to do so little and still show up late. Mom and Dad laughed before he even finished the sentence. Marla smirked. The wine glasses clinked again. And I smiled too, because I knew exactly what I was going to say next. But first, I let them enjoy it. I cut my food into perfect pieces and chewed slowly, my heartbeat as calm as the silence I'd carried for 3 years. I'd paid for the very marble floor beneath their feet, kept their lights on, and their kitchen renovation from turning into a foreclosure auction. I'd paid in silence. It started the night Dad came to my apartment. Rain drenched the cuffs of his suit. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Didn't ask for money, not at first. Just time. Just help. Just a secret. Then the papers came out. He'd refinanced the house twice. Business partner had skipped town. The payments were impossible. The house, my mother's temple, was going to be lost. Don't tell your mother, he whispered, his voice like paper. It would ruin her. He asked for $8,000 a month. At the time, I'd just been promoted. Senior financial analyst. My life had just begun to breathe. I had dreams. A trip to Florence. A down payment on a place of my own. I said yes. Because daughters fix what fathers break. Because it was supposed to be temporary. But months became seasons. Seasons became years. And silence became tradition. They remodeled the kitchen. Hosted extravagant parties. Bought a second car. Meanwhile, I skipped vacations. Lived like a monk. Sent payment after payment like clockwork. And all the while, they mocked me. So that night, when Caleb delivered his recycled punchline and the room filled with smug, shallow laughter, I reached for my fork with steady fingers. I felt something uncoil inside me. Something sharper than rage. Something truer than pain. Clarity. They didn't owe me gratitude, but I no longer owed them silence. After dinner, I sat in my car for an hour, watching the house glow like a smug mirage. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight finally lifting. I opened my banking app. 36 transfers. $8,000. Each. I canceled the next payment with a single tap. The soft ping of confirmation felt like a war horn. The next day, I wore my sharpest blazer and answered emails like nothing had changed. But everything had. Because I had. That night, I drove back to the house. My hands didn't shake this time. This time, I wasn't here for dinner. I was here for the reckoning. The driveway was lined with luxury SUVs and an air of carefully managed wealth. I parked under the skeletal shadow of a dormant cherry tree and stared at the front door like it might open on its own. I could already hear the laughter bleeding through the walls, warm and curated. The kind of joy you hear in sitcoms, fake and flammable. Inside, the house was buzzing. The smell of garlic, wine, and roasted lamb hung like perfume. Caleb was already mid-story, gesturing with a piece of bread as if the world needed to orbit his words. I stepped in. Emery. Just in time, Mom cooed, pulling me into a stiff hug that reeked of lavender and performance. Her eyes scanned me up and down, gray blazer, minimal makeup, hair neat, and nodded her approval. Inspection passed. We were just talking about gratitude, she added with a saccharine smile. So was I replied evenly. Dinner began like a symphony written in denial. Dishes gleamed, laughter flowed too easily, and the table looked more like a museum exhibit than a place for nourishment. Caleb held court like a king, recounting a story about some student he transformed, while Marla nodded like a metronome. Dad sat at the far end, half present, eyes on his plate like it held secrets. Emery, Mom chimed, "You've been so quiet lately." "Everything all right at work?" "Busy," I said. "But good. Busy surviving, right?" Caleb quipped, and Marla joined in, their laughter sinking like a practiced routine. I smiled tightly. Spreadsheets keep me honest. "You know," Mom murmured, "if you just let loose a little." "She can't," Caleb interjected. "Emery doesn't know how to contribute unless it's silently." And there it was. The recycled punchline. Polished with a fresh coat of mockery. Mom and Dad said, "You never contribute anything to this family." He said it like gospel. This time, I didn't flinch. I set my fork down gently, the clink louder than thunder. The room shifted, energy tilting. "Perfect," I said. All eyes turned. "The $8,000 I've been wiring to cover the mortgage for the last 3 years? That ends today." Silence detonated. Caleb blinked. Marla froze. Dad coughed violently, wine catching in his throat. Mom paled. I reached into my purse and laid my phone on the table, screen glowing. 36 transactions. $8,000. "He asked me," I said, nodding toward Dad. "The business failed. The partner disappeared. You thought it would ruin her." Dad looked broken. I didn't want them to know. And I kept your secret. I bought your silence, your stability. I bought your lie." Mom's hand trembled. "Emery, please, not like this." "Like what? Publicly? You wanted everything private until it got expensive." Caleb stood, face burning. "This is manipulation." "This is math," I said, rising. "You said I don't contribute. How much is contribution worth to you?" Nobody spoke. They stared at the numbers, their little digital ghosts haunting the center of the table. "Greg," Marla whispered. "Did you know?" He shook his head slowly. "We thought. You just liked being alone." "I liked having boundaries," I replied. "I liked pretending my silence was noble." It wasn't. It was submission. Dad spoke at last. "We were desperate. I thought you could handle it." "And you were right," I said. "But that doesn't mean you should have asked." Mom looked at me with eyes that finally saw. "You can't just walk away." "I already did. This morning. The transfer was canceled. The leash is off." The silence that followed was thick. Heavy. Real. You're punishing them, Caleb muttered. No, I said. I'm freeing myself. And I walked out. The night air was cold, biting. The kind that clears everything. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. Behind me, the perfect house flickered like a stage after the curtain falls. Tomorrow, the fallout would begin. And I was ready. It didn't take long. The next morning, my phone lit up before sunrise, buzzing with notifications that spilled across the screen like tiny landmines. 10 missed calls from Mom. 4 voicemails from Dad. 3 from Caleb, all silent. No messages from Marla. That silence said more than any words could. I didn't answer. Not that day, not the next. I let the calls pile up like forgotten letters at a doorstep. Every ding from my phone was a reminder that they had seen the numbers, the truth, the spreadsheet of my sacrifice. And now they didn't know what to say. Or perhaps they didn't know how to say it to someone they finally realized they never really knew. For 3 days, I avoided the places I knew they'd find me. I worked from home, declined calls from my manager under the guise of needing focus, and turned my apartment into a sanctuary. It felt strange at first. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It didn't whisper that I was lesser. It hummed like potential, like the beginning of something uncharted. Then on the 4th day, Caleb came. He didn't call first, didn't text, just knocked, 3 short raps that told me he wasn't there for drama. Just desperation. I opened the door halfway. He looked different. Not in the way people change after a haircut or vacation, but in the way a person looks when the script they've been performing for years finally runs out of lines. You never told me, he said, not stepping inside. You never asked, I said, not opening the door wider. He nodded once, the corners of his mouth twitching like he wanted to say more. But whatever pride he had clung to during the dinner was gone now, washed away by truth. I'm sorry, he said. And for once, he sounded like he meant it. For what? For assuming you were just background noise. That landed somewhere deep. Not because it hurt, but because it was finally honest. I let him in. He didn't try to hug me. Didn't sit. Just looked around my small, neat apartment like it was another version of me he'd never taken the time to meet. They want to sell the house, he said quietly. Dad says they can't keep up. Not without you. I didn't respond. Mom's been crying. A lot. And Dad's barely talking. So they called you to come fix it? He shook his head. No. I came because I needed to understand how we let this happen. That surprised me. You didn't let it happen, Caleb. You just didn't look closely enough to stop it. He sighed and dropped into the armchair by my window. The afternoon sun was starting to spill across the rug, casting everything in gold. They always said you were the quiet one, he said. But I think you were just holding the weight the rest of us refused to carry. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. The next weekend came with an unexpected knock. Not Caleb. Not my father. This time, it was my mother. She stood in the hallway of my apartment building like she didn't belong there, her tailored coat wrapped tightly around her, clutching her handbag like it was some kind of shield. There was a stiffness in her stance that didn't belong to winter chill. It was the awkward posture of someone unused to being the one who knocks. The one who isn't in control. May I come in? She asked. Her voice was softer than usual, but her eyes still searched my face like she was trying to find a version of me she recognized. I opened the door, not because I wanted her inside, but because it was time. Time to see what truth did to someone who had curated lies for so long. She stepped into the apartment slowly, like it was fragile. Like she thought she might break something just by being there. This is nice, she said, her voice trailing off as she looked around. But I could hear what she wasn't saying. It was too small, too modest, too unlike the stage she had built her life upon. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't offer wine. I didn't pretend to be the daughter who soothed. Why are you here? She sat on the edge of the couch, crossing her ankles like she was being interviewed for a magazine spread. Even here, away from her gold-trimmed mirrors and curated plates, she wore performance like perfume. I came to apologize, she said. It hung in the air between us. Like incense. Like smoke. You came because the house is being listed next week. Caleb told me. Her lips pressed into a tight line. It's true. Your father, he isn't handling it well. I nodded slowly, not breaking eye contact. Because the truth is more expensive than he expected? She winced. Not visibly, not to anyone else, but I knew that face. I knew how subtle the tremors in her expressions were. I had studied them my entire life. We built that house, she said. Every inch of it. It was supposed to mean something. It did, I said. It meant you were willing to lose your daughter to keep your illusion. Her breath caught. Not a gasp. Just enough to register that she had finally heard it. Truly heard it. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear, Emery. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. She looked down at her hands, perfectly manicured even now, and for a long moment, the silence stretched between us like a wound. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought silence was love. I thought giving without asking meant I belonged. She looked up. Her eyes glistened, not in the showy way she cried at Caleb's wedding or during family videos, but in a way that startled even her. You do belong, she said. You always did. I leaned forward, voice low. Then why did it take $288,000 for you to notice me? That question didn't ask for an answer, and she didn't try to give one. After a long moment, she stood. We're moving into a condo. It won't be the same. But maybe that's a good thing. She paused at the door. I'm sorry we didn't see you. She turned to leave, but I spoke. You still don't. Her fingers tightened on the doorframe, but she didn't turn around. You built a house on borrowed money and expected me to be your foundation. Then you called it tradition. You called it family. She nodded slowly. I know. No, I said. You don't. Not yet. But maybe someday. She lingered in the doorway, and I could see the storm of memories behind her eyes. The years she spent chasing appearance over authenticity. The birthdays she missed in favor of planning Caleb's. The time she cut my college visit short to attend a charity gala. The dozens of times she praised my brother's smallest victories and treated my milestones like afterthoughts. Do you remember my high school graduation? I asked. Her face tensed. Of course. Do you remember what you told me when I got my diploma? She said nothing. You said, at least you didn't trip. Then you turned and told Caleb he looked great in his suit. The memory hung between us like cold fog. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said quietly. But you did. Over and over. In ways you never even realized. And I kept giving. Because I thought if I gave enough, you'd see me. She looked at me then, not like a mother who had it all figured out, but like a woman who had built her entire life on a story she was only now realizing wasn't true. We were wrong, she said. You were, I replied. I just finally stopped agreeing. She nodded and finally left, the door clicking closed behind her like punctuation at the end of a long chapter. And I stood there in the stillness of my own space, the kind of stillness that doesn't ache, the kind that feels earned. For the first time, I didn't feel like a daughter trying to be enough. I felt like a woman who had reclaimed her name. Months passed. The season shifted. Winter loosened its grip on the city, and spring spilled into the streets like ink into water, sudden and slow at the same time. The day I saw the Hollingsworth house listed online, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt nothing. Just a calm emptiness. A clean slate. The photos were professionally taken, of course. Every surface gleamed, every room staged like a memory trying to convince someone it had been real. But I saw through it. I saw the cracks, the artificial shine. I knew the mortgage had been paid in silence, in sacrifice, in spreadsheets no one had ever thanked. And now the house was a product. A listing. A number on a screen. I drove past it once. Only once. The for sale sign tilted in the wind, and the windows were dark. No golden glow. No candles scented like ambition. No laughter echoing through marble halls. It looked like a skeleton of something that once pretended to be alive. They were moving into a condo across town, Caleb had said. Smaller. Simpler. Real. I never visited it. Instead, I stayed in my own place. I bought a bigger coffee table. I hosted small dinners with coworkers and neighbors. I started a journal. I went back to Florence, but this time, I booked a solo trip. I ate gelato without guilt, wandered cobblestone alleys without rushing back to anything. I learned what my own voice sounded like when it wasn't whispering. Caleb and I talked more. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. Sometimes, that was enough. One evening in late April, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My father's. Inside was a photo. Not of the old house. Not of Caleb. Not of a party or a framed portrait. It was a photo of their new kitchen. Sunlight streamed in through a wide window. The counters were clean but lived in. A half-empty coffee mug sat beside a fruit bowl. And beside it, a sticky note. It read, "Emery, we're trying. Love, Dad." I didn't cry, but I did smile. Weeks later, Marla called. It was brief. She said she was sorry. She said she'd never realized how easy it had been to perform loyalty rather than live it. She told me she was pregnant, and that she hoped I might one day want to be part of the child's life. I told her I'd think about it. That was the truth. I didn't rush to forgive them. I didn't force a happy ending. I let the wounds breathe. Some began to close. Others remained tender. But they belonged to me now. They weren't shame anymore. They weren't secrets. And the house? It sold after 6 weeks. I didn't ask for the final number. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it was no longer my burden. What mattered was that I no longer measured my worth in silence or dollar signs. I bought a new rug for my living room. One with bright colors I wouldn't have chosen before. It clashed with the couch. It made the space feel loud in a way that finally felt like mine. Every morning, sunlight hits my coffee cup just right. And I remember. Contribution isn't what you give to be seen. It's what you refuse to give to stay invisible. For years, I was the quiet one. Now, I am quiet only when I choose to be. And that is the most powerful sound of all.